Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Are you sure about this? Jane whispered, her concerned gaze fixed on her sibling. Dulcie nodded, determination etched across her features. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The sisters huddled together in Dulcie's bedroom, a fortress of floral wallpaper and antique furniture that felt increasingly suffocating. Outside, footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy, purposeful strides that could only belong to their father. Quick, Jane urged. Hide it! Dulcie scrambled to conceal the vial just as the door burst open. Lawrence Fairfax filled the doorway, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the room. His steely eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. What's going on in here? He demanded, voice low and threatening. Nothing, Father, Jane replied smoothly. We were just talking. Lawrence's gaze lingered on Dulcie, who met his eyes with a mixture of defiance and fear. I hope you're not still entertaining those foolish notions, he said, each word dripping with disdain. Dulcie's jaw clenched. They're not foolish, Father. This is who I am. The air grew thick with tension as father and child engaged in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Lawrence turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As his footsteps faded, Dulcie let out a shaky breath. I can't keep living like this, Jane. I need to be true to myself. Jane wrapped her arms around her sibling. I know, and I'll be here for you every step of the way. Dulcie retrieved the vial from its hiding place, staring at it with a mixture of hope and trepidation. This is it. This serum will finally make my body match who I am inside. Are you sure it's safe? Jane asked, worry creasing her brow. Dr. Hampley assured me it's been thoroughly tested. It's my best chance at a complete transition. Jane nodded, squeezing Dulcie's hand. Then let's do this, together. With trembling fingers, Dulcie uncapped the vial. She hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision bearing down on her. Then, with a deep breath, she brought the vial to her lips and swallowed its contents in one swift motion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a warm, tingling sensation spread through Dulcie's body, starting in her core and radiating outward. She gasped, eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. Dulcie, are you okay? Jane asked, gripping her sibling's arm. I think so, Dulcie replied, her voice trembling. I can feel it working. Over the next few hours, the sisters watched in amazement as subtle changes began to take place. Dulcie's facial features softened, her body's contours shifting ever so slightly. It was a gradual process, but unmistakable. As dawn broke, Dulcie stood before the full-length mirror in her room, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in her life, she saw herself, truly herself, reflected back. It's really happening, she whispered, voice filled with wonder. Jane embraced her, both of them overcome with emotion. You're beautiful, Dulcie, inside and out. Their moment of joy was shattered by a thunderous bellow from downstairs. What have you done? Lawrence's roar echoed through the house, followed by the sound of pounding footsteps on the stairs. The sisters exchanged panicked glances. Quick, lock the door, Dulcie urged. Jane rushed to secure the lock just as Lawrence reached the top of the stairs. His fists pounded against the wood, threatening to splinter it. Open this door immediately, he demanded. Dulcie's heart raced, but she stood tall. No, Father. We need to talk, but not like this, not with you in a rage. You've defied me for the last time, Lawrence shouted. I'll drag you to a doctor myself if I have to. Jane placed a steadying hand on Dulcie's shoulder. We should go. It's not safe here right now. Nodding in agreement, Dulcie grabbed a pre-packed bag from under her bed. They had prepared for this possibility, knowing their father's volatile temper. As Lawrence continued his assault on the door, the sisters slipped out onto the balcony. With practiced ease, they climbed down the trellis and made their way across the expansive grounds. Where will we go? Dulcie asked as they reached the edge of the property. Dr. Hampley's, Jane replied. She'll know what to do next. They set off down the quiet street, the rising sun at their backs, leaving behind the only home they'd ever known. Dulcie's heart was heavy, but there was also a sense of liberation. For the first time in her life, she was moving forward as her true self. The journey to Dr. Hampley's office was tense, every car that passed making them flinch. But they arrived without incident, buzzing the intercom with shaky fingers. Dr. Hampley's voice crackled through the speaker. "Who is it?" "It's Dulcie and Jane Fairfax," Jane replied. "We need your help." There was a pause, then the door buzzed open. They hurried inside, climbing the stairs to Dr. Hampley's third-floor office. The therapist was waiting for them, concern etched across her face. "What's happened?" Dulcie stepped forward, and Dr. Hampley's eyes widened in recognition. "You took the serum." Nodding, Dulcie explained the events of the night. Dr. Hampley listened intently, her expression grave. "You were right to come here," she said when Dulcie finished. "Your father's reaction is unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected. We need to ensure your safety first and foremost." She made a few phone calls, speaking in hushed tones. Finally, she turned back to the sisters. "I've arranged for you to stay with a friend of mine. She runs a support group for transgender individuals and has experience helping people in situations like yours." Relief washed over Dulcie. "Thank you, Dr. Hampley. I don't know what we would have done without you." The therapist smiled warmly. "You're not alone in this journey, Dulcie. Remember that." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Hampley pulled Dulcie aside. "The physical changes are just the beginning. There will be emotional and psychological adjustments as well. I want you to promise me you'll keep up with your therapy sessions, even if they have to be remote for a while." Dulcie nodded solemnly. "I promise." With new directions in hand, the sisters set out once more. They took a series of buses and trains, always looking over their shoulders, half expecting to see their father's angry face in the crowd. As the day wore on, Dulcie became increasingly aware of the changes happening to her body. Her center of gravity shifted, her gait naturally adjusting to accommodate her new form. She caught her reflection in store windows, marveling at the person staring back at her. "How does it feel?" Jane asked softly as they waited for their final bus connection. Dulcie considered the question. "Strange, wonderful, terrifying. It's like I'm finally wearing clothes that fit after a lifetime of hand-me-downs that were always too big or too small." Jane squeezed her hand. "I'm so happy for you, Dulcie, and so proud of your courage." They arrived at their destination as the sun was setting. The house was modest but welcoming, with a small garden out front bursting with colorful flowers. A woman with kind eyes and graying hair greeted them at the door. "You must be Dulcie and Jane," she said warmly. "I'm Margaret. Come in, come in. You've had quite a journey." Inside, the house was cozy and filled with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together perfectly. Margaret showed them to a small guest room with twin beds. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it's safe, and you're welcome to stay as long as you need." Exhausted from the day's events, the sisters thanked Margaret profusely before collapsing onto their beds. Despite her fatigue, Dulcie found sleep elusive. Her mind raced with thoughts of the future, of the challenges that lay ahead. As if reading her thoughts, Jane's voice came softly through the darkness. "We'll figure this out, Dulcie. One day at a time." Dulcie smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for her sister's unwavering support. "One day at a time," she agreed. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment and discovery. Dulcie's body continued to change, settling into its new form. She marveled at the softness of her skin, the curves of her hips, the weight on her chest that was both foreign and deeply right. Margaret proved to be a godsend, offering not just a safe haven, but also practical advice on everything from clothing to makeup to navigating the world as a woman. She introduced Dulcie to other members of the transgender community, creating a support network that became invaluable. Jane, ever the protective sister, threw herself into research. She pored over medical journals and legal documents, determined to understand every aspect of Dulcie's transition and the challenges they might face. Through it all, Dr. Hampley remained a constant source of support. Their therapy sessions, now conducted via video chat, helped Dulcie process the emotional roller coaster of her transition. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed," Dr. Hampley assured her during one particularly difficult session. "You're not just adjusting to a new body, but to a new way of moving through the world. Give yourself time and grace." Dulcie nodded, wiping away tears. "Sometimes I look in the mirror, and I still can't believe it's really me, that I finally look on the outside the way I've always felt on the inside. That disconnect will lessen with time," Dr. Hampley said gently. "But remember, your worth isn't tied to your appearance. You were always Dulcie, even before the physical changes." As the weeks turned into months, Dulcie grew more confident in her new skin. She ventured out more, reveling in the simple joy of being seen and accepted as herself. There were still moments of discomfort or dysphoria, but they became fewer and farther between. One sunny afternoon, as Dulcie and Jane walked through a local park, a group of children ran past, laughing and playing. One little girl stumbled, skinning her knee. Without thinking, Dulcie knelt down to help. "Are you okay, sweetie?" she asked, her voice soft and comforting. The little girl nodded bravely, trying to hold back tears. Dulcie pulled a tissue from her purse and gently dabbed at the scrape. "There, all better," she said with a smile. "You're very brave." As the child ran off to rejoin her friends, Dulcie stood, suddenly aware of the significance of the moment. It was the first time she'd interacted with a stranger who saw her only as she truly was, a kind woman helping an injured child. Jane, who had watched the interaction with a proud smile, squeezed her sister's hand. "You're a natural," she said softly. Dulcie felt a warmth spread through her chest. It just felt right. That evening, as they sat in Margaret's cozy living room, Dulcie's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Her heart leapt into her throat when she saw the caller ID. "Home." With trembling fingers, she answered. "Hello? Dulcie?" Her mother's voice, tentative and strained, came through the speaker. "Is that you?" "Yes, Mother, it's me." There was a long pause, filled with unspoken words and years of misunderstanding. Finally, her mother spoke again. "Your father. He's not ready to talk yet, but I miss you, both of you." Tears welled in Dulcie's eyes. "I miss you too, Mother. Can we meet? I'd like to see you, to understand." Dulcie looked at Jane, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, I'd like that. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the city." As Dulcie hung up the phone, a mix of emotions swirled within her: hope, fear, anticipation. "Are you sure about this?" Jane asked, concern evident in her voice. Dulcie took a deep breath. "I have to try. She's reaching out. That has to mean something." The day of the meeting arrived, and Dulcie found herself standing outside the cafe, heart pounding. Jane squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I'll be right here if you need me," she promised. Dulcie nodded gratefully and stepped inside. She scanned the room, her breath catching when she spotted her mother sitting in a corner booth. Elizabeth Fairfax looked older than Dulcie remembered, worry lines etched deeply around her eyes. As Dulcie approached, her mother's eyes widened in recognition. She stood, hands fluttering uncertainly. "Dulcie?" she whispered. Dulcie nodded, fighting back tears. "It's me, Mother." For a moment, they stood frozen, the weight of years of misunderstanding hanging between them. Then, with a choked sob, Elizabeth pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace. "Oh, my darling," she cried. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." They sank into the booth, both crying openly now. As they calmed, Elizabeth pulled back, studying Dulcie's face with wonder. "You're beautiful," she said softly. "But more than that, you look happy, truly happy." Dulcie smiled through her tears. "I am, Mother. For the first time in my life, I feel whole." They talked for hours, Elizabeth asking questions and listening with genuine interest as Dulcie explained her journey. There were moments of awkwardness, old habits and misconceptions to overcome, but the love between mother and child bridged the gaps. As the cafe began to close around them, Elizabeth reached across the table to take Dulcie's hand. "I can't promise it will be easy," she said. "Your father, he needs more time. But I want you to know that I love you, Dulcie. You're my child, and I'm proud of your courage." Dulcie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, Mother. That means everything to me." They parted with promises to keep in touch, to rebuild their relationship one step at a time. As Dulcie walked out of the cafe, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she was no longer alone on her journey. Jane was waiting outside, pacing anxiously. When she saw Dulcie's tear-stained but smiling face, she rushed forward. "How did it go?" Dulcie hugged her sister tightly. "It was a start," she said. "A good start." As they walked arm in arm down the street, Dulcie felt a surge of hope for the future. She had faced her fears, embraced her true self, and taken the first steps towards reconciliation with her family. There would be more obstacles to overcome, more battles to fight, but she was ready to face them. For the first time in her life, Dulcie felt truly at home in her own skin. She was Dulcie Fairfax, proud and unapologetically herself, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. The sisters rounded a corner, laughing together about some shared joke, when they quite literally ran into a familiar face. Dr. Hampley, arms full of groceries, stumbled backwards, barely managing to keep her balance. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry!" Dulcie exclaimed, reaching out to steady the therapist. Dr. Hampley's eyes widened in recognition. "Dulcie! Jane! What a wonderful surprise!" As they helped her gather the few items that had fallen, Dr. Hampley couldn't help but marvel at the change in Dulcie. Gone was the uncertain, dysphoric individual who had first walked into her office. In her place stood a confident young woman, radiating happiness and self-assurance. "You look wonderful, Dulcie," Dr. Hampley said warmly. "How are you feeling?" Dulcie's smile was genuine and bright. "Better than I ever thought possible. Thank you for everything you've done for me." Dr. Hampley shook her head. "You did the hard work, Dulcie. I just provided a little guidance along the way." They chatted for a few minutes, Dulcie excitedly sharing the news of her reconciliation with her mother. Dr. Hampley listened with genuine joy, her heart swelling with pride for her patient's progress. As they prepared to part ways, Dr. Hampley paused. "Dulcie, I have a favor to ask of you. I'm starting a support group for young people just beginning their transition journey. Would you consider coming to speak to them? Your story could be incredibly inspiring." Dulcie hesitated for a moment, then nodded firmly. "I'd be honored. If I can help even one person feel less alone in their journey, it would mean the world to me." Dr. Hampley beamed. "Wonderful! I'll be in touch with the details." As they said their goodbyes, Dulcie felt a sense of purpose settle over her. Her own journey was far from over, but she now had the opportunity to use her experiences to help others. It was a responsibility she embraced wholeheartedly. The day of the support group meeting arrived, and Dulcie found herself standing nervously outside the community center where it was being held. Jane, ever supportive, gave her a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this," she whispered. "Just speak from your heart." Dulcie took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they entered the building and made their way to the meeting room. Inside, a small group of individuals sat in a circle of chairs, their faces a mix of anxiety, hope, and curiosity. Dr. Hampley greeted them warmly, introducing Dulcie to the group. As Dulcie took her seat, she looked around at the faces before her. She saw reflections of her own past struggles in their eyes, and her resolve strengthened. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice soft but clear. "My name is Dulcie, and I'm here to share my story with you. But more importantly, I'm here to listen to yours." Over the next hour, Dulcie opened up about her journey, the fears, the triumphs, the setbacks, and the joys. She spoke candidly about the challenges she'd faced, both internal and external, and how she'd overcome them. As she talked, she saw recognition dawn in the eyes of those listening. Heads nodded in understanding, tears were shed, and a palpable sense of connection filled the room. When Dulcie finished speaking, a young person near the back raised their hand tentatively. Did you ever feel like it wasn't worth it? Like the struggle was too much?" Dulcie nodded, her expression empathetic. "There were times when I felt overwhelmed, yes. Times when I wondered if I was strong enough to see this through. But in those moments, I reminded myself of why I started this journey in the first place. To be true to who I am, and that truth, that authenticity, is worth every struggle." Another participant spoke up. "How did you deal with people who didn't understand or accept you?" "With patience, when I could," Dulcie replied. "And with boundaries when I needed to. I learned that I couldn't control others' reactions, but I could control how I responded to them. Sometimes that meant educating. Sometimes it meant walking away. But always, always, it meant staying true to myself." The questions continued, each one allowing Dulcie to share a different aspect of her experience. As she spoke, she felt a growing sense of connection with these individuals who were at various stages of their own journeys. Towards the end of the session, a quiet voice from the corner of the room asked, "Do you have any regrets?" Dulcie paused, considering the question carefully. "The only regret I have," she said finally, "is that I didn't have the courage to be my true self sooner. But I've learned that it's never too late to embrace who you are." As the meeting drew to a close, several participants approached Dulcie, thanking her for sharing her story. The gratitude in their eyes and the hope in their voices touched her deeply. One young person, barely older than a teenager, hung back until the others had left. They approached Dulcie hesitantly. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been so scared to take the next step, but hearing your story, it gives me hope." Dulcie felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out and squeezed the young person's hand. "You are braver than you know," she said softly, "and you are not alone." As they left the community center, Jane linked her arm through Dulcie's. "You were amazing in there," she said proudly. "You really made a difference." Dulcie smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I hope so. They reminded me so much of myself not so long ago. If I can help make their path even a little bit easier." Her voice trailed off as she spotted a familiar figure standing near the entrance. Her father, Lawrence Fairfax, stood rigidly, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Dulcie's heart raced as she approached him. "Father, what are you doing here?" Lawrence cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your mother. She told me about your meeting and about this group. I wanted to see for myself." There was a long, tense silence. Then, to Dulcie's shock, Lawrence's stern facade crumbled. "I heard what you said in there," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "About regrets, and I don't want to have those regrets, Dulcie. I don't want to lose my child because of my own stubbornness." Tears spilled down Dulcie's cheeks as her father pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry it took me so long to understand." As they stood there, father and daughter reunited, Dulcie felt the last piece of her journey fall into place. She had faced her fears, embraced her true self, and now, against all odds, she had regained her family's love and support. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.